Hey, what up everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here tonight with a late night video. I was able to watch December to Dismember, of course, the ECW 2006 pay-per-view. I was on Twitter today and WWE tweeted out the fact that 9 years ago today was the December to Dismember, and boy oh boy, this was a bad one. I've honestly never watched this DVD. I ended up watching on the WWE Network, but I've owned this DVD for probably at least 5 years. I never watched the show. I've always heard of how bad this was, and it's always sort of had this gimmicky image of being the worst pay-per-view that WWE has ever put on. Of course, this is the ECW brand, but this is under the WWE banner. In 2006, after the success of the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD and the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, ECW was brought back, put on the Sci-Fi Network. It was the third brand for WWE, behind Raw, behind SmackDown. The show was... It wasn't good. It wasn't great. It was 1 hour, and that's probably a lot what I used to like about Main Event when it was on the WWE Network before being pulled because of the UK contract that made it exclusive to them. It was a 1 hour show. It was almost like a small independent wrestling company that had a little bit of money, had their own television network. And that's basically what you got to see. They tried to, put a lot of guys on the show when it first came out. Of course, Kurt Angle and Big Show were drafted to be on the show. And, of course, you had Rob Van Dam and some ECW originals. CM Punk, who had a name for himself, coming off of Ring of Honor and the independent circuit, was brought in sort of as the rookie, the guy that you're supposed to watch grow, but underneath your eyes. ECW was used as like a developmental program to get guys on television and see how they would react in front of a large crowd. They would always use gimmicks during the first shows. Undertaker's first time in ECW, DX comes to ECW, Ric Flair wrestles for ECW, things like that. But it always revolved around Big Show, Kurt Angle, Rob Van Dam. Test was brought back after a time of not being with the company. It was a 1 hour show. And then getting their own pay-per-view just had bad written all over it. It was horribly placed on the WWE calendar. This was 1 week after Survivor Series, which, even today, back in 2006, was looked at as one of the big shows that you had to order each and every year. Survivor's 2006 was the show that had the Team DX. It was Triple H, Shawn Michaels, CM Punk, and the Hardy Boys going up against Team Rated RKO, Edge, Orton, Nitro, Knox, and Gregory Helms, main evented by Batista versus King Booker. You had Team Cena going up against Team Big Show. Kennedy versus Taker. It wasn't the best show in the world, but still, for the people that ordered Survivor Series to come around and say, hey, 7 days later, next weekend, we're going to run another pay-per-view for ECW. We want you to buy that one. And then 2 weeks after that, we're running Armageddon 2006. So we needed to get you that show as well. Just too many shows all in one place. They were bad from the start. They only booked that there was going to be two shows that they two matches that were going to be advertised on this. Hardy's versus M&M, which is sort of like a dream match from the tag team division. These guys were really blowing it up. And them wrestling for ECW was supposed to be a plus because it was the first time this match was going to be held in ECW. Was one of the big things to make you come over here. And then, of course, the Extreme Elimination Chamber match for the ECW World Championship. The match, as one of the shortest time lengths of a WWE pay-per-view, only just over 2 hours and 15 minutes. You can tell that there's a lot of things that go on during the show where they just say, just go out there and do whatever you want to do. Take up as much time as you want to. The Hardy Boys and M&M kick off the show. They have a very good match, but the match is honestly very too long. At almost 25 minutes. Matt and Jeff win with the Swanton Bomb after Johnny Nitro, aka John Morrison, knocks out Melina, who got up on the ring apron and was dropped with a drop kick on accident. The Hardy Boys were able to pick up the win. I thought this was the WWE Championship match, but this was just sort of a dream match, and that's really all it was. From there, we go to Balls Mahoney wrestling against Matt Striker in a Striker's Rules match, which is basically where Matt Striker says Balls Mahoney is not allowed to use any of his moves, any of his gimmick. Basically not allowed to do anything. He's not allowed to chant balls. He's not allowed to hit his finisher. He's not able to do this, that, and the other. Balls ends up still getting the win in a match where Striker has a promo which lasts probably twice as long as the match is and just seems to go on forever. From there we go into a match which made no sense at all. Elijah Burke and Sylvester Terkay wrestling against the FBI. I always sort of thought FBI was a heel group, so a heel tag team versus another heel tag team. Trinity is on the outside, barely wearing any clothes. I was never a big Trinity fan. If you were, let me know. I just thought she was out there. Her gimmick was that she wasn't wearing much, but she wasn't, blow away hot. She wasn't. I even had a little bit of a thing for Francine, but Dawn Marie was always the girl in ECW, even though she wasn't a part of ECW in 2006. I think she'd already split from the company years earlier when she had her run on SmackDown, which I was really surprised that she got into. It was almost like those girls from ECW were just too cracked out or something like that they just didn't want to bring them in. But Trinity had her short run with the FBI. It was what it was, and Burke and Terkay, who were coming out of developmental, they get the win. You can tell that they're sort of trying to push out the ECW originals and move on from there. Then we go to a match where Daivari and the Great Khali come out to the ring, and then Tommy Dreamer comes down, and it looks like we're about to have Great Khali versus Tommy Dreamer. Short little squash match of Khali killing Dreamer, something that I was actually honestly looking forward to, because every match it lasted twice, maybe even 3 times as long as it should have at this point. And then Khali gets out of the ring and stands at ringside, and I was like, I wanted to see Khali. Ends up having Daivari, who's a good wrestler, going up against Tommy Dreamer. Nothing really spectacular in this match. Great Khali gets kicked out for trying to get himself into the match, and then Daivari ends up still being able to beat Dreamer one-on-one. So Then we go to an intergender tag team match, which was Kevin Thorne and Ariel, the big nipple vampire. Shelly Martinez, always one of my favorites, beating Mike Knox and Kelly Kelly. Mike Knox was Kelly Kelly's boyfriend at the very beginning of ECW, always very jealous. There was a spot in the match when Kelly Kelly was actually trying to tag Mike Knox, and Mike Knox wouldn't tag Kelly, almost letting Ariel defeat Kelly to teach her a lesson, something like that. Something that we ended up never really finding out what the deal was. They would move on from here with Kelly Kelly actually dumping Mike Knox and moving on from there. We go to the Extreme Elimination Chamber already in the main event. This was supposed to be Lashley, Big Show, Rob Van Dam, CM Punk, and Test, and Sabu. Sabu ended up getting laid out after the first match of the night. We see him getting carted off and headed to the hospital. And he's replaced by Hardcore Holly, a guy that Paul Heyman on ECW had been trying to get placed into the match for weeks upon weeks, and never able to get him in there. Now here he is, just getting into the match. Ends up being Hardcore Holly and Rob Van Dam starting off the night. CM Punk is the first guy that gets out of his pod to come into there. He's eliminated by a 5-star frog splash from Rob Van Dam very, very early in the match. It was one of the reasons why everything would blow up shortly in ECW after this. One thing leads to another. Once Bobby Lashley is supposed to get released from his pod, ends up getting locked in by Paul Heyman's security guards. He has to bust out through the top through a table, which is placed inside of his pod. He climbs out through the top, ends up wrestling Test, defeating Test, and then waiting on Big Show to come out. And then Bobby Lashley hits a spear on Big Show, 1, 2, 3, and gets the win. Lots of things happen. Paul Heyman leaves the company. Tommy Dreamer and Stevie Richards turn in their resignation, trying to leave the company. Big Show ends up leaving the company. Everything blows up in their face. Big Show was just at a point in his career when he just, didn't want to wrestle anymore. From here, he ended up trying to become a boxer. Wrestled an independent match with Hulk Hogan in Memphis, replacing Jerry the King Lawler. And then just sitting out basically until getting the call to come back for the big Floyd Mayweather match at WrestleMania 24. Paul Heyman and Vince McMahon ended up getting in a fight over the direction of ECW. Basically, Paul saying that they took him off of SmackDown, they put him on ECW, that he was going to have, almost creative control over the former brand that he had, and he had ideas about where he wanted to go. Vince totally rewrote ECW December to Dismember at the last minute, making it just a total, complete bullshit of a show. Paul Heyman wanted to make CM Punk be champion. He wanted CM Punk to defeat Big Show very early with submission in the early parts of the match to show you that CM Punk was a real competitor in ECW. Vince didn't like that idea and ended up saying that he wanted Lashley to be the guy who ended up getting the deal. This would build up, of course, Lashley being the guy to go up against Vince McMahon, later on at the company. And it just blowing up in everybody's face with the big WrestleMania match, which ended up doing a big, huge number for the company. But at the end of the day, I don't know. It just wasn't where you wanted to be. I think you could have set up Trump any other way in the world. But it is what it is. A very bad show. I highly recommend you don't watch it unless you really want to put yourself through torture one night and see what it's all about. December to Dismember 2006. I've seen it once. Probably never want to see it again.